Fred Truman extols the remarkable countryside and wildlife of the North York Moors National Park, now on to, and describes the mark of past generations on its landscapes.
In most places you go and look for beautiful views. Up here, they're all beautiful. The 12th century abbot of Rievaulx described it as a marvellous freedom from the tumult of the world. Tucked away in the northeast corner of Yorkshire and created in 1952, this is the North York Moors National Park. In all seasons, the park displays a rich tapestry of colour and movement. Characteristic of these high moors, the red grouse eke out a poor living from the heather at this time of the year. Adult grouse live entirely on plants. To reach the remaining heather shoots, they may even have to dig down through the snow. 12,000 years ago, in this part of Europe, the Ice Age finally gave up its grip. Floods of melted water carved out this landscape. Sharing the winter bleakness of the high moor with the grouse, these Swaledale sheep are among the toughest of their kind. The withdrawing of the ice and the thaw, which created the bare bones of this scenery, did not leave it just as we see it now. Today, the National Park gathers together no less than 100 separate valleys and nearly 150 individual moors. And the moors were at first tree-covered with Scots pine, oak, birch, hazel, elm and others. Although we're often blamed for what we've done to the landscape, The primeval forest that was here began to be cleared by the earliest people who occupied these uplands as hunters, farmers and herdsmen. Then, the new Stone Age people of 5,000 years ago caused even more tree clearance, which actually created the moors. They left behind them barrows, burial places. Here we call them hows, after the Old Norse word for them. They're easily overlooked, but these barrows are the oldest man-made structures in the park. Then, during the Iron Age, the remaining trees were taken from the upland, and when the Romans arrived in AD 70, the moorland was open, more or less as we know it today. The Romans too faced the challenge of these moors, constructing their amazing roads. Although the top surface is missing, the foundations of this one are still here. The countryside of the North York Moors National Park has been occupied over and over again, and everybody has left marks of their passing. Beneath its surface too, past generations have delved into its resources. On the North Sea coast at Sand's End, quarrying was carried on for centuries to get at the many different raw materials found here. Within the cliff face, jetstone was one, a fossilized wood like the monkey puzzle tree and only found in this area. Jet was fashioned into jewellery which became very popular in Victorian times. And close by, dogger stones, the raw material of a cement with the special property of hardening underwater. The biggest scar on the landscape is the old alum workings. In its day, a mineral of great political and economic value in Europe. Alum was used as a waterproofer, a fire retardant, and as a fixing agent in dyeing cloth. Although work ceased here in the middle of the last century, recolonization by plants has hardly begun. The spoiled tips are too unstable and acidic. Nature can be quick to heal the scars we create in the landscape, but when the building and work has been on the scale of the 19th century iron workings in Rosedale, then nature has a job on. The kilns are peaceful now, but life was hard for the hundreds who worked here, especially in winter. People are fascinated by these old remains. They become worth saving like nature. Both are part of the park's tapestry. And the search for subterranean riches still goes on. At Boulby, near the tallest cliffs in England, is one of the deepest mine shafts in Europe. From 1,100 metres down, potash is hauled up for use in fertiliser, 2.5 million tonnes a year. We'll have to wait and see whether archaeologists will want to preserve this site when work comes to an end early in the next century. The park's boundary includes 26 miles of coastline recognised as being of national landscape importance and defined as Heritage Coast. The steep cliffs at Boulby, rising to 200 metres, provide ample space for nesting kittiwakes who come back here every year from their ocean travels to breed. The most outstanding feature of the North York Moors National Park is the huge expanse of heather-covered upland, the largest continuous stretch in England and Wales. It's a totally managed landscape, and that work begins like this. Controlled burning of the heather on a 12-year cycle is a process that will maximise the population of wild red grouse in preparation for the shooting season later on. This method of burning creates a patchwork of different aged heather plants. It benefits not only the grouse but also sheep, and other birds will take advantage of the improved habitat. Every activity comes under the caring eye of the National Park Department. They keep a small, full-time staff of rangers and a much larger body of volunteers who give up much free time for love of this countryside. They help to ensure that the needs of public enjoyment are compatible with those of conservation, landscape and wildlife. Up to 9 grouse chicks may be raised from one clutch. The health of the parents after winter and their success in breeding is important to the economy of the moor. All this depends on good heather management. The older, deeper heather provides protection for sitting hens and their broods. The shorter burnt edges encourage insects which provide protein food for the growing chicks. The soft sandstone here doesn't meet the birds' need for grit, so keepers provide a quartz alternative in spring and autumn. A threat to the grouse moors is caused by bracken encroachment. In 1988, it affected over a quarter of the moorland. Something had to be done. Without full-time management by landowners, the heather would in the end give way to bracken and scrub, and animal communities would change too. Abbey was once the finest Cistercian house in England. In the mid-12th century, more than 500 monks and lay brothers lived here. It was said that the church swarmed with them like a hive of bees. The busy activity of house martins recalls the work of the Abbey community, which included beekeeping, along with fishing, farming and sheep. Cloth merchants from Flanders, France and Italy often came here. In its heyday, Rievaulx Abbey owned large areas of surrounding land and a combined flock of 14,000 moorland sheep, a quarter of all the sheep around here at the end of the 13th century. Even today, the numbers of sheep on the moor are no greater than in medieval times. Lapwings have left their free-ranging congregations on farmland to establish territories, nest and raise their young on the high moor. On these bleak moors, the treeless landscape and the nearby North Sea may keep spring temperatures down, a hazard for lambs and nestlings. The grouse will face an even greater danger than the weather later in the year. There are shooting butts like these all over the moor. But the birds must always be alert because there are natural dangers as well. A hunting stoat. To moorland gamekeepers, these are vermin, and together with foxes, crows and other predators, they want them controlled. The protection of the grouse is a gamekeeper's prime concern, and the economics of grouse shooting demand it. Britain's largest wader, the curlew, also comes here from the lowlands to breed. The moorland management is of great benefit to these birds because it encourages an abundance of insects on which they feed. The golden plover is another upland bird which returns with the spring, but will quickly retreat to nearby farmland if there's late snow. The occasional sighting of a deer is a reminder that the Normans had hunting forests here long before the development of grouse shooting in the 19th century. But for the last 70 years, it is the Forestry Commission which has brought about the most rapid visual change in the landscape. The impact of dense, regular planting, especially of conifers, has not been welcomed by everybody. Today, the Commission tries to meet criticism and to work in cooperation with the National Park Department, though it is obliged to reach financial targets set by the government. Thinning tightly packed trees is part of good management and improves wildlife habitats, but progress is inevitably slow. Conifers can take 60 years to reach full maturity, and broadleaf trees twice as long. Here in the National Park, the Commission is working to create a good public image. In the late evening, a Commission ranger hopes to give visitors a glimpse of one of Britain's most elusive birds.
What we're going to probably hear first is their churring, which is very much a metallic kind of noise. Some describe it like a Kawasaki two-stroke motorbike. Some describe it like a sewing machine. It's got this very metallic trill to it. And then, if we're lucky, we'll be seeing them perching on a branch. They don't perch on a branch like a normal bird, but they actually perch with the length of the branch. So what you'll be seeing is the silhouette of the bird against the skyline.
At first, the party is rewarded with the sight of a short-eared owl, a bird that doesn't limit its flight to the late hours. A brood of up to 7 owlets are raised in a nest on the ground, and there's plenty of food here, small mammals, birds and insects. After sunset, the object of the search can at least be heard. This alone will satisfy some of the bird watchers, but then moments later, the top prize. A hunting nightjar in full view. The nightjar's quaint posture, unusual shape, erratic flight and nocturnal habit combine to make it one of the strangest of birds. Nightjars are summer visitors, and clearings created by felling and new plantations attract them and the insects they feed on, especially moths which will develop from caterpillars like these. Even in daylight and on the ground, nightjars do not easily give themselves away. These mysterious birds with their larger hair-fringed mouths were once thought to have milked livestock when they were seen hawking for insects on grazing land. It earned them the country name goatsucker. The heat of the day makes others more active. Wood ant nests are common in the forest, and their presence may lead to one of the strangest sights in nature. In high summer, birds can host many blood-sucking parasites. Crows and rooks are particularly vulnerable because they live close together, so they drop on an ant's nest. The ants, with their formic acid defences, will kill off most parasites even on a heavily infested bird. The short-term irritation this causes is better than the long-term problem. Eventually, the ants themselves must be got rid of, along with the unwanted irritants they've unwittingly dealt with. Here in Dalby Forest, the Commission has created a special nature trail of different woodland habitats. The presence of forestry vehicles is a reminder that these are still basically working woodlands. Most of the open country in the National Park is privately owned, but the Commission, a public body, readily provides access to the delights of its landscape and things that need a closer attention. Not surprisingly, the National Park is a very popular place. On some days in August, there may be nearly 6 visitors to every one of the 26,000 residents. In many ways, this puts considerable pressure on the more delicate features of the landscape. Inevitably, most people come here by car, which creates a big problem for National Park management. In an area with no cities and few towns, tourism has become very important. It's the major source of jobs and generates millions of pounds. At the Visitors Centre, the National Park Department takes every opportunity to pass on its historic message: conservation of landscape and wildlife for quiet public enjoyment, and fullest consideration of the needs of those who live and work here all the year. The creation of our national park was a visionary enterprise. Conflicts of use will occur, and the department staff seek to resolve them. At an annual cost of no more than a large school, their services are good value. Traditional crafts and skills attract visitors, but the charm may hide a grimmer truth. A national park is more than a tourist attraction. The economic health of residents is basic to its well-being. Wool merchants no longer come from abroad. These fleeces are worth less than the cost of the shearing. Farmers have a tough life here. What they do has always had a fundamental effect on the landscape. Their contribution must not be downgraded. The National Park Department has a farm scheme which helps farmers conserve the traditional moors landscape, but grants don't yet cover the whole area. In all its moods, the North York Moors is a major attraction to walkers. The park is crisscrossed by 1,100 miles of public paths. Many are ancient or have roots in tradition. The popular Like Wake Walk was created in the 50s and is said to recall the medieval practice of carrying coffins over the moors to consecrated ground on the outskirts. The Like Wake Walk's popularity is a problem. In early 1980, it was being used by at least 3 times the number of walkers it could bear. The damp peaty surface is fragile. Serious erosion was the result. So now the route is being discouraged and alternative long-distance walks recommended, routed over more robust parts of the landscape. There's a lot to see up here, and nothing is more popular than the North Yorkshire Moors Railway. Privately run by a small staff and hundreds of volunteers, it is able to absorb large numbers of visitors, giving them a spectacular view as it puffs its way through one of the most dramatic areas of landscape in the park. Newtondale is a magnificent reminder of primeval beginnings. It was a glacial drainage channel deeply gouged out by debris-laden torrents of meltwater. At Sand's End, a national trail known as the Cleveland Way follows the dramatic cliffs of the Heritage Coast. The path skirts the edge of the national park for much of its 108 miles length. The walkers who use it make a significant contribution to the local economy. Like the kittiwakes, seagoing fulmars also return here to breed, though some will remain all year round. At sea they are quiet, but when together they make up for lost time. Their stout beaks and tube noses show that they are members of the petrel family. In the last 100 years, this once rare bird has made its appearance on most of Britain's coastline. For a few weeks in late August and September, the moorland is transformed. A mass of tiny heather flowers bloom, 3,000 million to a square mile, creating one of the most stunning landscape experiences in England. This period attracts a large number of visitors, but not all are human. Up to 2,000 beehives with 15 million bees are moved here, and North York Moor's heather honey is eagerly carried away to many parts of the country. North Yorkshire is a flourishing stronghold for badgers, an animal which faces extinction in other parts of northern England. The planting of forest, begun 70 years ago, gave them the seclusion they need. The growing trees may have protected sets which were already long established. The soil is well drained and easy to dig, so their sets can be extensive. They favour the woodland when searching for food, such as small mammals, frogs, snails and earthworms. Their diet is very varied. They will also eat fruit, fungi, roots and even grass. Their habits make them welcome to foresters. At the end of September, another season's work is nearly complete. Ignoring the weather, Ken Hornby is taking his moorland flock to the annual sale on the high moor where they've lived. For a few days after gathering, he's kept them down on the farm, but now they go back. Driving the sheep to sale is an old tradition. Only Ken Hornby does it now. He says they look cleaner and fitter on arrival, and it's cheaper too. There are 2,500 sheep here today, but it's also a meeting of neighbours. The animals are to be sold for breeding and fattening.
Right, the result of the first class Israel del Leon was first, Almega.
At the show before the auction, Ken Hornby is as usual amongst the winners. The Swaledale Hue produces wool of fine waterproof quality, which will pass on her moorland toughness in any crossbreeding.
5 pounds, 25, 25, 40, 65, 86, 26, 20, get on. 6 pounds, 26, 20, all correct, yours below. 6 pounds, 26, 26, 40.
Like their undervalued fleeces, the animals don't fetch much. Prices have halved in the last 3 years. Some sheep are sold for less than £5. For the farmers, it's a situation beyond their control, caused by decisions made elsewhere. When the price does not even match government subsidy, farmers feel humiliated. Nothing is gained for years of hard work. Although the summer visitors may not be aware of this harsher reality, it is still part of the life of the park. The significance of our national parks will go on increasing as their value is recognised, nationally and internationally. They are our common heritage and our common responsibility.
Next week.